Hey, you guys listen to 88.9 The Cage. You're on air with Sean Tasker, and this is Fandom Life. It is now 8 o'clock. And for the next 2 hours, I will be talking about Star Trek with my guest,
John O'Driscoll.
So if you guys like Star Trek, then you should listen up. If you know someone else that likes Star Trek, tell them to listen right here on 88.9 The Cage. And we will be talking about Star Trek. And then if we run out of time, or if we run out of something to talk about, which I don't imagine that we will, but I was at Comic-Con today, so I might start bragging about that. It's fine, whatever. But by guest request, I'm going to play all these things that I've done by the Killers. So you guys go get the people that you know that love Star Trek, or you can just sit tight, get some drink, maybe some food, sit down, relax, and get ready to nerd out with us here on Fandom Life. But once again, this is all these things that I've done. You guys listen to 88.9 The Cage. Enjoy.
Due to copyright purposes, this song cannot be played.
That was all these things that I've done by the Killers. You guys are listening to 88.9 The Cage. You're on air with Sean Tasker, and this is Fandom Life. We are talking about Star Trek today with my guest,
John O'Driscoll.
And hope you guys like Star Trek, because that's what we're talking about. But as you guys should know if you listen to the show, I start off every show by quizzing my guests on the fandoms of my fandom hat. So let's see what you can do. Name off every fandom that you recognize from my hat.
Oh, man. I see Pokemon, Hunger Games, Doctor Who, Disney, Star Wars, Sherlock, Star Trek. And that's all.
Okay, let me see. So you said let me see. So make sure you said Pokemon. Hunger Games. Did you get that Supernatural?
No. Mm-mm.
Yeah, Supernatural. Castiel's Wings. A lot of people miss that. Lord of the Rings. Doctor Who. Avengers.
Oh, I missed the Avengers.
How'd you miss the Avengers?
I didn't even see it there.
Yeah, it's stuck there in the corner.
Okay.
Disney, Star Wars, Sherlock. That's Percy Jackson, the Trident.
No clue. All right.
You haven't seen Percy Jackson?
Nope.
Firefly, Harry Potter, Star Trek. That's Tumblr.
Oh, okay.
That's the Zombie Research Society. And then there in dead center is Sean Tasker.
Yeah.
Because I am a fandom.
You have your own fandom.
I have my own fandom.
That's
because
beautiful.
That's how I am. Yeah, so you're into Star Trek. How'd you get into Star Trek?
How did I get into Star Trek? Oh, man. Star Trek is some of my first memories. My dad was raised on it. My dad has watched every episode of Star Trek as it was aired since 63. So when I was little, when I was born, Star Trek Next Generation was just getting popular. And so I would run out in my diaper and watch Star Trek with my dad every night. And then when the movies came out, the first movie I saw in theaters was Star Trek Generations. That came out in 93. And I've just been obsessed with Star Trek ever since.
Yeah?
Yep.
Yeah.
Lifelong.
I got into Star Wars first, and I always assumed that if you liked one, you weren't allowed to like the other one. And so I never really got into Star Trek until I had you on, or until I knew you were coming on for the show. Mm-hmm. And then that's when I decided to watch all the Star Trek movies. Unfortunately, the 6th and the 9th ones are not. I think that's what it said. Yeah, the 6th and 9th ones are not on Netflix. So unfortunately, I was not able to see those, but I have seen all the other ones.
You should have called me. I've got them. They're on DVD.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. Yeah. So, first things first. Who's your favorite captain?
Who is my favorite captain?
Kirk,
that's the kind of question
Picard?
To blow up a Trekkie's brain. I guess it comes down. It's the difference between the captains. I was raised on Next Generation, so probably Captain Picard. I feel like Captain Picard is a more realistic captain. Captain Kirk is the swashbuckling, chandelier-swinging captain, where he always punches the bad guy in the face, and he doesn't pay attention to the rules, and he always gets the pretty girl at the end of the episode. And that's the reason a lot of people prefer him, but Captain Picard is a much more realistic leader. And so I prefer his character.
For those of you that don't know, Captain James Tiberius Kirk was played by William Shatner, and Captain Jean-Luc Picard was played by Sir Patrick Stewart. Mm-hmm. So you guys can now have faces to the names, and everyone knows, William Shatner. He's the big guy. He was a Priceline negotiator. If you guys aren't into Star Trek, Priceline negotiator. and then Sir Patrick Stewart, he was Professor Xavier from the X-Men. That's some of the more modern things that they have done with their lives now.
Yep, absolutely.
So besides just the captains being different, what else is different between Shatner age Star Trek and Stewart age Star Trek?
That's a great question, because Star Trek, the original series, I mean, it came out in the 60s. And if you go back, and I highly recommend watching like some classic episodes on Netflix, because in the 60s, it was revolutionary. Science fiction up until this point was essentially a cult following. I mean, you had stuff like The Space Prince and War of the Worlds and This Island Earth and stuff that you see riffed on like Mystery Science Theater. Star Trek was like the first thing to really bring science fiction into popular culture. And if you go back and watch it, a lot of the storylines seem so rudimentary to us, because we're used to big Oscar-winning screenwriters and screenplays, and these stories in Star Trek are very simple, but back then, back in the 60s, they were revolutionary. And then as compared to the next generation, there was already a loyal fan base, and so they got deeper into commentary on like society and society's problems, and they were kind of showing it through Star Trek. Next Generation tried to do, like, for the 90s what Star Trek did for the 60s, the original series.
Okay. How would you say sci-fi has grown as a genre, like as well as, you know, how Star Trek has been along with it for a long time?
Man, as a genre, you know, George Lucas talked about watching Star Trek and watching science fiction, old science fiction, and that's where he took his inspiration to write Star Wars. And you know, J.J. Abrams, who's super popular right now, he grew up watching Star Wars, and he was obsessed with it, and now he's, you know, cranking out sci-fi classic after sci-fi classic. It's become much more mainstream, you know, like Star Wars, the obsession that there's been for the last 40, 50 years, over 40 years.
40 years.
70s?
Yeah, because 77 was when the
that's
New
insane.
Hope.
It's, you know, I was obsessed with it growing up, and kids nowadays still are. My kids are going to be obsessed with Star Wars. And it's grown and changed to be much, you know, it's cool. The cool kids watch Star Wars. The cool kids watch Star Trek.
Yeah, being a nerd is now cool.
Being a nerd is cool. Man, I wish that had happened when I was in high school. I don't know.
I in middle school, I was definitely shoved into lockers and into trash cans. I
Absolutely.
had the cliche.
I had to hide my Star Trek isms until I graduated from high school. But you know, it's more widely accepted because you have these huge multi-million-dollar budget movies that are coming out that are expanding the fan base, and I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, like when the Avengers came out, then comic books aren't just for nerds anymore.
Oh my gosh,
you know,
the Avengers just destroyed everything up until then, comic book hero wise, movie wise. Like, you know, there's a lot of great comic book movies out there. Like, this current trend that we're on with Marvel really started with, you know, with X-Men back in 99 and 2000. But I mean, I feel like it culminated with the Avengers, like $200 million in opening weekend. Is insane.
That's ridiculous.
And I feel like we owe that, and we owe this obsession that we have with comic book heroes and with science fiction to these early shows, to those early original series episodes of Star Trek. And I feel like Gene Roddenberry and the creators like really paved the way for this fandom that we have now.
So when you say Gene Roddenberry, I don't exactly know who you're talking about. Who is Gene Roddenberry?
Gene Roddenberry he originally wrote Star Trek. He came up with the idea, and he produced the original series and the first few movies, the first few Star Trek movies. there was only a couple of seasons of the original series of Star Trek, and it got a really loyal fan base, and people were really upset when it was canceled. And I think you know a little bit about being upset about a sci-fi TV show being canceled prematurely.
Firefly. Firefly.
But
Not a good reaction out of you. That's not fair.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry for hurting you like
The
that.
feels. They need to bring it back. They really do.
Well, I didn't get to go to Comic-Con and meet Nathan Fillion, so
No, my friend did. My friend got to meet Nathan Fillion
my
yesterday
gosh.
when he went.
That's incredible.
Yeah, right.
But what was I saying? Oh, and so Star Trek, the TV series, was canceled, much to the chagrin of the fans. They were really upset about it. And I remember my dad telling me how pissed he was when it was over. But Gene Roddenberry was smart, and he took the resources that were being put into the TV series, and he put it towards a movie franchise. And I feel like that's really what gave Star Trek the foundation it needed to last, you know, from 1963 to where we are now.
Yeah. So wait, which one did he make with that then? You said he put it towards a movie franchise.
Well, the first movie to be released with the Star Trek franchise was just the motion picture, Star Trek
Okay.
the motion picture. And that's on Netflix. And, you know, I am a diehard Trekkie. I love Star Trek. And I'll be the first to admit that the first Star Trek movie kind of wasn't that wonderful.
Yeah, I sat through that, and there was a 5-minute scene of just looking at the USS Enterprise from different angles.
Mm-hmm.
For
The camera,
5 solid minutes.
the camera just pans around the Enterprise for 5 minutes. Okay, this is why they did that. Star Trek, the motion picture, was specifically made for the fans that were already out there.
Oh.
For the fans that already existed and just the fan base that was already set up. And so it was a bust at the box office because all the nerds went out to watch it, but there weren't any new people brought in.
Right.
There wasn't anybody added to the fan base. And so Gene Roddenberry and the powers that be, they kind of sat back and reevaluated their strategy, how to get a new fan base, how to get more butts in the seats, basically. And they hired an action movie director named Nicholas Meyer. And Nicholas Meyer came in, and instead of making a nerdy science fiction-y, worshipy Star Trek movie, he made a really awesome action movie that had a Star Trek themed storyline, basically. Okay. And this is Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan.
Right.
And I hope anybody out there listening will just take 2 hours and sit down on Netflix and watch Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. It is such a great movie.
It really is.
It's just that is the boost that Star Trek needed. It was a hugely popular movie when it came out, and it got a whole new wave of fans, and that gave the franchise the strength to make Star Trek 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to here we are now. J.J. Abrams has just released Star Trek Into Darkness.
Right.
What, last year? Last year,
I
2
think
years
it was last
ago.
year.
And so they tried to keep that pattern going of cranking out, good action movies that would please the nerds as well, but bring new people
Right.
in. And I believe, how many did they make? They made 6 movies that were specifically with the original series cast. Mm-hmm. And then they had one movie, Star Trek Generations, which was a bridge. It had members of the original series cast and members of the Next Generation.
Because Sir Patrick Stewart and William Shatner fight together.
Exactly. In Star Trek
cool.
Generations.
That was pretty cool. I enjoyed
That's
that.
a great moment for sure.
But for the Wrath of Khan, they make a. Don't you have to watch the episodes? Because aren't there episodes with Khan in them beforehand?
Yes and no. There is an episode of the original series, and it's called Space Seed, and it's also on Netflix. And in Space Seed, Captain Kirk and the crew of the Enterprise are out and about, and they find a ship called the SS Botany Bay. And when they open up the Botany Bay, there's a handful of people inside of it they've been cryogenically frozen. And when he thaws one of them out, it turns out to be Khan. And Khan is, what's the word?
I don't know.
Oh, man. Sean, what good are you?
Well,
I'm just kidding.
I mean, I know I had one job, and I'm failing at this one job.
genetically altered. That's it. He's been
okay.
genetically altered
Right,
to be super smart and super strong, and he's super cocky. And he determines that he is stronger and better than Captain Kirk, and so he tries to take over the Enterprise. But Captain Kirk, like I said, is the punch the bad guy in the face kind of hero,
Right.
and he always wins. And so he ends up defeating Khan, and he banishes Khan and his people to an uninhabited planet. And they get to go down, and Khan gets to be the leader of his own planet. And so you think everybody wins. But really, you don't need to see that episode to understand about Khan, because they do an adequate job of explaining where he's from, why he's there on the planet, and why he wants revenge against Captain Kirk. And so, like, you, by all means, I mean, you can go and watch the original episode. It's kind of cheesy and kind of goofy, but they do a good job of explaining the backstory in The Wrath of Khan.
Okay. So Star Trek has lots of different series and retries. What are the differences, and like how do they change and evolve as the series went on?
Well, the original series was in the 60s, and then in the late 80s and early 90s is when they had Star Trek: The Next Generation, and that was wildly popular. And it was a big gamble to release a new branch of this franchise. And when it did so well, they're like, well, let's try it again. And so shortly after, and kind of overlapping with Star Trek Next Generation, they had Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Rather than being about the Enterprise out and about in the galaxy exploring, Deep Space Nine is about a space station on the edge of Federation space and all the crazy adventures that they have. And there's a big war going on, and I've watched bits and pieces of Deep Space Nine, and that's with Captain Benjamin Sisko, and it's a good show, and it lasted just as long as Next Generation. It was pretty popular as well. There weren't any feature films made from Deep Space Nine, but after that they had Star Trek Voyager, and that's about another ship like the Enterprise that's out exploring, but it gets lost, and it's about them trying to make their way back to Earth, and there's all sorts of different stories going on in Voyager. And the captain of the SS Voyager was Captain Janeway, and she was the first female captain as portrayed in Star Trek, so that was pretty cool. And then after Star Trek Voyager, they released Star Trek Enterprise. And Enterprise is a prequel to the original series. And it's about the captain of the Enterprise X, which is the prototype of the USS Enterprise. And I never got into Enterprise because, for me, it was before they had like transporters and teleporters, and their ships didn't have shields, and I didn't have all the technology that I loved, and it was hard to get into, and it was pretty short-lived, but it did a good job of establishing some facts about, who is the Federation and why are they out exploring the galaxy and yada yada yada. And so that was the last TV franchise that they had of Star Trek, and it was a few years after Enterprise was canceled that Paramount released the new Star Trek movie with Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto.
Right. So how do the movies and TV shows, like, what are the order of those, so people can get a direct chronological storyline?
Oh, for the movies?
Yeah, like where do the movies place within, between the shows?
Oh, okay. Well, the movies happen like after all of the episodes, because the episodes are when the Enterprise and her crew are out on specific missions. They're out doing, particular normal spaceship, starship, Enterprise things. Whereas then after they're all older and more experienced, in the movies there's big catastrophic storylines that can take up 2 hours.
Right.
And so if you want to do things chronologically, I mean, watch all the episodes and then watch the movies. But the movies stand alone. You're able to watch the movies and enjoy them without having a background of the episodes, because they want to get, new fans. They want to have new people to pay for movie tickets.
Right. So, which series is your favorite series?
My personal favorite series is probably Next Generation, simply because that's what I was raised on. I feel like they had a lot more resources to make the Next Generation, so it's higher quality. It's funner to watch. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's still made in '89. There's still a lot of hokey goofiness.
Still super cheesy.
But it's Patrick Stewart. I mean, I can watch Patrick Stewart act all day. He's really talented, and so it's a lot of fun. And then the Next Generation movies, you got Generations, First Contact, Insurrection, and Star Trek Nemesis, and those are all fantastic. Those are all really great movies. And I mean, if you're a Trekkie or not, I feel like anybody can enjoy those movies. But the original series movies they're all a lot of fun, and I enjoy those too.
Yeah. Yeah, I have heard that Next Generation is the most popular series. Because, there are some, really nerdy celebrities. I was talking about Chris Hardwick, and his favorite is definitely Next Gen. And so whenever he talks to anyone that's a Trekkie, then, he goes straight to Next Gen, and that's what he talks about and how much fun he has watching that show.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of TV shows. You can't watch a season of Family Guy without picking up a bunch of cheesy Star Trek references, because Seth MacFarlane was a big Star Trek fan. Actually, there's an episode of Deep Space Nine where Seth MacFarlane is essentially an engineer worker. He's a red shirt, and he's just kind of
that's nice.
Wandering around. And so he loves Star Trek, and so he plugs that stuff in his shows all the time. And then, what's it called? The Big Bang Theory. I mean, how often does Will Wheaton appear on The Big Bang Theory? And they make all sorts of jokes about Wesley Crusher, and I mean, that was his character on Star Trek, and so it's interesting the ripple that Star Trek has made in current pop culture.
Fun fact: Will Wheaton and Chris Hardwick are actually roommates.
I had no idea.
So they're actually really close friends, and they totally hang out.
That's way awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, and Chris Hardwick, I was telling you, but for those of you that don't know, Chris Hardwick, he basically has my dream career. He's kind of the reason why I have a nerdy talk show, is because he has nerdy talk shows called Nerdist. It's a podcast, and if you're a nerd, which you probably are if you're listening to his 2-hour conversation about Star Trek, you're probably a nerd. So you should probably go subscribe to Nerdist. It's free. It's on iTunes. It's great. I love Chris Hardwick. He has some of the best conversations, and he's a stand-up comic, and he usually talks to other stand-up comics. But anyway, back to what we're talking about.
Stop drooling over Chris Hardwick.
Well, yeah, Man Crush Monday. It's not Monday, but it's fine. Yeah, so I'll be honest, guys. Since I don't always know exactly all the things I want to talk about, sometimes I'll have my guests write down things to talk about. And one thing that you wrote down was, what's the point of Star Trek?
What is the point of Star Trek? This is my favorite thing. This is something that I've come to appreciate over my lifespan of enjoying Star Trek. Because when I was little, I liked Star Trek because they had phasers, they had laser guns, they had spaceships that could travel faster than light, and they had aliens, and there were cool fights, and yada, yada, yada. And the kid in me still enjoys watching that. But Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry, when he was writing it, he imagined the future where our planet wasn't consumed with trying to, be better than each other, and outsmart each other and outfight each other. Like, he was writing Star Trek during the 50s and 60s during the Cold War, and mankind was very separated. We're separated into countries, and we're fighting, and we all hate each other. And why is that? Why we're the same? We all have, brains and arms and legs and hearts, and why are we also against each other? And so he wrote this story about, we're not alone in the universe. We need to be united as a planet. And And so it's Gene Roddenberry, he had a hopeful vision of the future. That's what I always say Star Trek is. Star Trek is a hopeful vision of the future. That someday we can all be united and we can work to better ourselves and work to advance our knowledge and get out and explore the galaxy. I mean, a really important part of Star Trek, and you hear them talk about it all the time, especially in these last two movies. In the new Star Trek movies, they talk about the Prime Directive. The Prime Directive of Federation is no Starfleet excursion will interfere with the natural growth and progression of a civilization. So if the Starship Enterprise flies over a planet and there's a group of people down there that are just learning how to create fire, they've just built the wheel, they're very primitive, they're not going to go down there with their starship and show them how to travel faster than light, because that is the difference between explorers and conquerors. And Starfleet, they're not conquerors. They go out to explore and to learn and to better themselves. There's a lot of episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation where Captain Picard has to weigh, do I help these people and violate the Prime Directive, or do I step back and keep the Prime Directive? And there's times when he violates it, and it hurts. It hurts the civilization the same way the conquistadors, hurt the Mayans and the Incans, and hurt their natural progression. Right. And Gene Roddenberry, he understood that, and he had this hopeful vision that someday we would be united. And so I feel like that is the point of Star Trek. One thing I love, the original cast, the original crew of the Enterprise consisted of Captain Kirk, who's from Iowa, and Lieutenant Uhura, she's from Africa, and then you've got Spock, the Vulcan, and you've got Scotty, the Scotsman, and you've got Chekhov, a Russian. And think about that. They had a Russian on board their ship at the height of the Cold War. In popular culture, we had Anton Chekhov on the bridge of the Enterprise during the Cold War. And I think that was very interesting. And Sulu, he's there at the helm, and he's from Japan. And it was a very racially diverse crew, and it was Roddenberry trying to say this is what it's going to be like. It's kind of interesting to note that in the original series, girls on board the Enterprise, they wore very short skirts and low-cut dresses, and they're all dressed, not very modestly. And
provocatively.
Exactly. And that was pop culture back then. I mean, that's pop culture now, of course.
Yeah.
But then in The Next Generation, women on board the Enterprise wore the same uniforms as men, and it was equalizing.
Right.
And so it's interesting to note the changes between the original series and The Next Generation. They addressed, issues that hadn't been addressed in the original series. And so I feel like that's always been the purpose of Star Trek, to, how to put this, educate the masses, help everybody get that same vision. And Star Trek, man, I can't imagine a better life than growing up and dreaming of going to Starfleet Academy and getting on a starship, and I'll clean toilets on the Enterprise. I don't care. I'd be happy doing whatever on the Enterprise. But so that's something that's always been important to me, that Star Trek really is a hopeful vision of the future.
Also, one of the things you wrote down was success of different franchises.
Oh, the success of different franchises. Well, we mentioned that a little bit, just how, the original series was very popular, but not popular enough to last. And so they were really smart with their marketing, and they released movies to help maintain its popularity and keep people watching TV and going to the movies. And then The Next Generation, when it came out, that's when it really exploded in popularity. And I mean, the term Trekkie, it started there in the 60s with the original series. But I mean, in the 90s when Next Generation was crazy popular, that's when it became a household name.
Yeah.
That's when it became a term. It's synonymous with nerd, you know, which I'm proud of. I'm proud of being a nerdy
Be
Trekkie.
proud of your nerd.
Absolutely.
John, your nerd is showing.
Good. I'm glad.
No, I always heard that like fans like of the old originals were called Trekkers.
See, okay. Oh boy. Okay. Now I'm
I
frustrated.
feel like I just opened up a can of oh no.
You absolutely did. Okay. The original series came out in the 60s, and they started calling themselves Trekkies. And then Next Generation started. And all these people who were like, oh man, Star Trek is cool, and they jumped on the Star Trek train. And they were like, we're Trekkers, right? Because we watch Star Trek, we're Trekkers. And all the original Trekkies were like, okay, look, you're welcome to get on board our Star Trek train.
Yeah.
But the word is Trekkies. The word is Trekkies. They're like, no, we started it. We're cooler. We're Trekkers. And I feel that Trekkers has kind of withered and died. Like, I don't meet a lot of people calling themselves Trekkers anymore. And when I do, I lose my crap. And I do this. I have fought with Trekkers before. Actually, okay, one time on my mission, a lady called herself a Trekker, and I smiled politely and nodded and walked away, because it would not be polite for a Mormon missionary to rip the lady apart for using the wrong word. But the right word is Trekkie. The wrong word is Trekker. And if you hear somebody use Trekker, correct them.
All right, will do. So everyone knows the term red shirt is someone who just is there just to die, like an extra body that, you know, you can just kill off. But when I watched the movies, you know, Captain Picard was wearing a red shirt.
Right.
So
okay.
I'm like, he's not just there to just die.
For those of you unfamiliar, I suppose, with red shirts, in the original series, okay, you got to understand that the colors of the shirts denote what position they play on the Enterprise.
Right,
so
'cause blue is science, right?
Blue is science and medical. Yellow is command and tactical. Red is security and engineering. So if there's a problem on the Enterprise, if an alien or some sort of life form has gotten on board the Enterprise and is going around killing people, Captain Kirk is going to send security to go and see what's wrong.
Okay.
And they're probably going to be the first people to die. And the security are the red shirts. Now, if there's a problem with the ship, if the ship gets hit by a torpedo or something from an enemy ship, there's going to be explosions. There's going to be people running around fixing it. Those are going to be engineers.
Which are also red shirts.
Okay. And so if you're sending down an away team, you're going to want somebody from command and tactical. You're going to want somebody from science and a health officer. And you're probably going to want a security officer. And the security officer is the one in charge of the unsafe stuff. And so he's probably going to get killed.
Right.
And then, of course, you're going to look at it as you need to... You've got 45 minutes to establish a story and an episode on television.
Right.
And so before the first commercial break, if you want to let the audience know that the situation is serious, you're probably going to have to kill somebody off.
Right.
But you can't kill off Captain Kirk, and you can't kill off Spock or somebody super important. And so you kill off red shirts. And the red shirts usually just die to let you know that the situation is serious.
Okay.
Now the thing is, when they transferred over to Next Generation, and that was the new show, they'd redesigned the costumes. Starfleet had changed a lot, and at this point, red meant leadership, commander, and who else wore red? It was still security, actually, and then yellow, like. Worf, who's a Klingon, he wears a yellow uniform, and he's on tactical. And security has their own uniforms, and medical has their own uniforms, and so, things change. I mean, Captain Picard in, Star Trek First Contact, he's wearing a navy and purple uniform.
Yeah.
I mean, it just changes. But the original series, they were much more rigid on the colors. And if you were wearing a red shirt on the original series and you weren't Scotty, you were probably going to die. Now, this is a fun fact. You're familiar with the most interesting man in the world, the the Dos Equis commercials.
Oh, yeah. Stay thirsty, my friend.
Stay thirsty, my friends.
I don't always blink, but when I do, I blank.
Exactly.
Fill it
that
in with
guy.
whatever you want.
So that guy, my phone's turned off, so I can't look up what his actual name is. But the actor who plays the most interesting man in the world was an extra on Star Trek. And he actually played a red shirt that was out and about doing things for Scotty. And he survived the entire episode in which he was featured.
Of course he did.
And so that guy doesn't always play a red shirt, but when he does, he survives.
Yes. Oh, that is glorious.
So that is kind of a fun fact.
Oh, that is the meme to end all memes right there. That was...
I may have seen that on the internet in meme form, actually, so...
Well, I mean, I figured,
But,
and then you did your own research on it.
Of course.
Then sometimes the uniforms will be like red shoulders with black torsos or red torsos with black shoulders. Mm-hmm. So, like, what is there a difference in those? Do those mean something themselves?
Just the evolution of the show and of Starfleet, and it for different situations that they're in. I mean, Captain Picard has a dress uniform that he wears in Star Trek Insurrection, and he wears that as an ambassador meeting the leader of this new primitive race that's joining the Federation. In Star Trek 6, in the Undiscovered Country, and that's the one you didn't see. This is a really interesting... Right. It's one of my favorite Star Trek films. The Klingons have this big tragedy, and their main mining world is destroyed, and so their economy's in the toilet, and their race is going to go extinct if they don't join forces with the Federation. And Captain Kirk, who is, by the way, very racist, I guess you would say, against Klingons. He hates Klingons. Right. He doesn't trust them.
They're like the Daleks at that time, for you Whovians.
Woof. No, I'm not a Whovian. But
they know what I'm talking about. They know what I'm talking about.
All right. I admit there's another big fandom out there. But so Captain Kirk is very against the Klingons, and so the Federation thinks, well, what better sign of peace than to send our most famous captain, who's also famous for hating Klingons, to go and meet with the Klingon High Chancellor and get started on this peace treaty. And Captain Kirk, of course, doesn't want to participate, but he does at the behest of Spock, who has been promoted to an ambassador. And when they meet with the Klingons, they have dinner on board the Enterprise, and they serve Romulan ale to get everybody drunk and happy. And the captain and the crew all wear very nice dress uniforms that had been redesigned specifically for that movie. And so that was really cool. That's my dream uniform. Like, I had Star Trek Next Generation uniform growing up when I was younger.
Of course you did.
And right now in my closet I have 2 different original series uniforms. I have a blue one that I made myself, and I made the pin myself actually, and it's very...
Oh, wow.
I was really impressed. It looked...
Like with metalwork or something?
Oh, no, it's just a patch.
Oh, okay.
And so I got some iron-on material, and I cut out the Star Trek insignia, and then glued gold material over it, and then designed because each insignia is different too. There's a science and medical and leadership. Right. And so I designed the insignia myself and then just glued it on. And me and my family wore those actually to the premiere of the new Star Trek movie. We went to the midnight show, all decked out in our uniforms, and that was pretty epic. So to answer your question, like you were saying, there's lots of different uniforms, and they serve different purposes. And I mean, it's it's the same with cops. I mean, with cops and with soldiers, they're not always out in their dress blues.
Right.
The stuff they wear out on active duty is different than what they wear to graduation or ceremonies and stuff like that.
Yeah, right. Also, Worf has this like cord around his arm. Mm-hmm. What does that symbolize?
See, that's interesting. That's a good question, because remember how we were talking how Chekhov was Russian. He's on board the bridge of the Enterprise. And that was kind of to say, look at how accepting people are in the future. Uh-huh. Well, I had a conversation with my dad. We were talking about when he found out, when they announced that they were making a new Star Trek series, and they announced the cast, and they said Michael Dorn is going to be playing Worf, and Worf is going to be a Klingon. and a Klingon is going to be on the bridge of the Enterprise as their tactical officer. And Trekkies everywhere, united in their anger, like, Klingons are filthy, stinking animals. What are you going to put a Klingon on the bridge of the Enterprise for? I mean, like we were saying, Captain Kirk hates Klingons.
Right.
He would never trust a Klingon on board his ship. And Gene Roddenberry had written him in to defeat the racism that existed inside of Star Trek.
Wow.
To teach the fans a lesson. And I really find that really cool, really interesting. Worf wears a silver bandolier over his uniform as a symbol of his Klingon heritage and his Klingon culture. And it's to show that even though he is an officer of Starfleet, even then, the Starfleet is not conquerors. They embrace Worf's culture, and he's able to wear that part of his uniform on the bridge of the Enterprise. Now, granted, even though in the Next Generation the Federation is at peace with the Klingon Empire, there's still different factions of Klingons out there that hate them, that hate the Federation, and they try and attack them, and yada, yada, yada. But Worf wears the bandolier as a symbol of his Klingon heritage.
And for those of you that don't know, the reason Kirk hates the Klingons so much is because they killed his son, right?
Uh-huh.
What was his son's name?
His son's name was David.
David.
Anyone familiar with the new Star Trek movie that was just released, Into Darkness, the cute blonde girl, what was her name? Carol Marcus.
Okay.
Later on in the Star Trek canon, they have a relationship and they eventually have a son, Captain Kirk and Carol Marcus, and Carol never tells David who his father is. And he grows up and they work together.
You said that, I kind of imagine like a Darth Vader thing.
Exactly, yeah. They take David to Tatooine and leave him with his uncle.
Yes.
No. And so Carol and David work together on the Genesis project, and that's the foundation of the plot for Wrath of Khan, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. And in Star Trek 3 is where David dies. I'm sorry, a spoiler. Just you should have watched it by now.
Yeah.
But a Klingon killed him, took him hostage, and he died trying to save one of his friends. And so because of that, yeah, Kirk has always hated Klingons.
I was watching to an interview on the guy who invented the Dothraki language in Game of Thrones. So he's also made he also creates other fictional languages for like TV shows or movies or whatever. And so he was researching about how they made Klingon. Mm-hmm. And one interesting thing that I took away from that interview was they don't actually have a K sound in their language.
You know, I believe that every Klingon phrase and everything I've ever heard and learned, it's all very guttural.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
And so then the way that they say their name is, it's actually more of a kl. Like, instead of a singular K, it's like the KL mixed.
Right.
So it's like the way they had to do it like 5 times for the interviewers to get it right, but it was like Klingon. Like, it was very...
Gotcha.
And I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh, man. You know what? That'll be fun. Do you have the internet, or can I look something up?
Yeah, I have it on my iPad. I can play a song while you want to look up whatever you look up.
Perfect. Let's do that.
So, here is Battleborn by The Killers. You guys listen to 88.9 The Cage. We'll be right back for you guys. Enjoy.
Due to copyright purposes, this song cannot be played.
That was Battleborn by The Killers. You guys listen to 88.9 The Cage. We're on air with Sean Tasker, and this is Fandom Life. We are talking about Star Trek. We are almost halfway done with my guest,
John O'Driscoll.
and the reason we took a break was because John wanted to look something up on the internet. So you want to share with your friends what you learned?
Well, I just confirmed some embarrassingly nerdy knowledge that I already had. But you're familiar with How I Met Your Mother.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I watched the finale.
That is, I'm sorry that happened to you, actually. Never mind.
Yeah. Let's not talk about that. Anyway.
We'll go into that. But do you remember the episode where Robin, I think it was The Naked Man, where Robin goes on a date with a super nerd?
Yeah.
And he takes her to his favorite restaurant, which is this ridiculous science fiction nerd haven. and they order like their cheesy space fries and stupid stuff. And Robin does something, she can't handle it. She's trying to prove that the lemon law shouldn't be a thing. And she finally can't handle it, and she lemon laws this poor guy. And the guy slams his fist on the table and he says, Kapsal Kuch, which is Klingon for your mother has a flat forehead. And it is the most offensive thing you can say to a Klingon. If we were standing in a room right now with Worf, and I said to him, Kapsal Kuch, he would cut my head off.
Wow.
He would kill me without even thinking about it. Klingons, their biggest thing is honor. Honor, honor, honor. And if you say your mother has a flat forehead, that's just implying that she's not really a Klingon, that she doesn't have honor, thereby you don't have any honor. You've insulted his entire family, and it's better that you not live, and he'll kill you.
Wow.
So I've always thought that's I loved watching How I Met Your Mother, and when he threw that out, and then he says, you have no honor. And everybody thinks Kapsal Kuch means you have no honor. No, it means your mother has a flat forehead.
That is the greatest insult ever.
Yeah, so feel free to use that. But, oh man, just don't say it to Klingons. Don't say it. There's a restaurant.
So when I see a Klingon, I won't say it.
If you ever stumble into a Klingon, if you're ever off in the Delta Quadrants and their ship decloaks in front of you. No, there's a restaurant in Las Vegas. It was part of the Star Trek experience at the Hilton, and they dismantled the Star Trek experience, which, in my opinion, is a crime. But one of the only things to survive was a restaurant called Quark's Bar. And at Quark's Bar, there are Klingon waiters, and there's waiters wandering around. There's all sorts of people wandering dressed in full Klingon garb and makeup and everything. And one of the rules to work there as a Klingon, you have to be fluent in Klingon.
Oh, wow.
And so I assume if you went there and you told one of them that their mother has a flat forehead, they'd at least be really offended and shout at you and probably put on a scene.
Yeah. Like maybe not serve you, kick you out of the restaurant.
Exactly. But I think it'd be worth it.
Yeah.
I think it'd be worth it.
I got kicked out of the Star Trek Experience restaurant because I used a Klingon insult at one of the waiters.
Yep, absolutely. And funny story about running into a Klingon. I had the opportunity to work at Jordan Commons movie theater there in Sandy when the new Star Trek movie came out. And like I told you, I am the proud owner of multiple Star Trek uniforms.
Right.
And my manager told me that I could wear my Starfleet uniform to work at the box office every day as long as Star Trek was in theaters.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
So that was a beautiful 2.5 months.
Yeah.
And one day, the opening week, that first week, I'm there in my uniform, and I see off in the distance this guy who had to be over 7 feet tall walking towards me, and it looked like he was wearing hockey gear, like hockey pads.
Yeah.
And as he got up closer to me, I see he's wearing these metallic, giant, spiky boots and shoulder pads and what's it called? Chainmail
Oh, wow.
armor. And he has designed himself a latex prosthetic for his forehead and has the full Klingon wig and hair going on. He has fangs and full makeup.
Wow.
Complete Klingon regalia. Apparently, every time that a Star Trek movie is premiered at a large theater, he travels all over the country and just wanders around the theater dressed as a Klingon.
Wow.
When Star Trek First Contact came out, he did this. He told me it was at Grauman's Chinese Theater in Los Angeles.
Uh-huh.
And there was a huge group of Klingons already there just as part of the promotional stuff for the show. And so he went and just stood with them, and his costume was so legit, he snuck in with them.
Wow.
And he got to meet Patrick Stewart, and he was there at the premiere for the show.
Wow.
And so that was so successful for him that he just enjoys going around and doing it everywhere. So I have just randomly bumped into a Klingon. It was me and him in the theater. He wandered in mid-afternoon, and it was a ghost town. So I shared a very special moment. I was dressed up in my uniform, and he was dressed up as a Klingon, and we forged a grudging peace between our two empires.
Very nice.
That was cool.
Yeah. But yeah, just like how you're saying, you could dress up in your Star Trek uniform, as long as the movies were in. Not trying to brag, but today at Comic-Con, I went to go have lunch at City Creek right across the street.
Oh, okay.
And every other, like, one of those, like, little restaurants in the food court, there was a cashier or food preparer who was all cosplayed up.
The workers at the restaurant.
Yeah.
Wow.
In the food court, the workers.
That is sick.
I saw an Ash Ketchum that was ringing up someone's order. I saw some anime stuff. It was pretty awesome.
Okay. The success of Comic-Con in Salt Lake here in Utah is just
unbelievable.
unprecedented. It's so insane. And it's funny you say that because I walked across the street at the Comic-Con in September. And I mean, that blasted every convention record we've ever had here in Utah. And so me and my dad and my siblings, and we're all decked out in full Star Trek regalia, we walk across the street to City Creek, and we're getting freakish looks.
Yeah.
We walk in, my dad is dressed up as Harry Mudd, which is a classic old villain from the original series of Star Trek. And he has this huge handlebar mustache, and my dad, who was a seminary teacher for 20 years, has a giant glowing blue earring.
Nice.
Like, it looks like the jewel off of Men in Black, if you've seen Men in Black.
Oh, yeah.
And so, really, really kick-awesome costume. And people are looking at us like we're crazy. And now, 6 months later, the employees at the store of the mall across the street from the Comic-Con are dressed up, celebrating it. Oh, man. That makes me so insanely happy.
I just want to remind you guys are listening to KAGJ-FM Ephraim. Sorry, I just had to put that out there. Nice little disclaimer. We got to do the top of every hour because it is now 9. Well, it's 9:03, but it's 9 o'clock. But yeah, so what was I going to say? I'll just move on to the next topic. So, how do you feel about the new reboots with Chris Evans and Zachary Quinto and Carl Urban and
So I have some friends.
Benedict Cumberbatch?
Benedict Cumberbatch. I cannot be happier about Benedict Cumberbatch.
Really?
I'll explain why. But I have some friends that consider themselves Star Trek purists.
Purists.
They're very sophisticated in their Star Trek fanery, and it makes me ill having Star Trek discussions with these guys because they are so bent on some of the details that they prevent themselves from actually enjoying Star Trek, and it makes me so upset.
Is one of our past guests Diego Chavez among those?
Diego Chavez. No, he likes the new ones. And me and Diego can properly discuss Star Trek.
Because when I was talking to him, sorry to cut you off.
No,
when I was talking to him about coming on this, we got a little off topic, and Star Trek Into Darkness came up, and he was like, "Yeah, my friend was so mad that they chose Benedict Cumberbatch as Khan because Khan is a Hispanic and not a British man. It doesn't work."
You want to know something amazing about that conversation? Me and Diego are complaining about the exact same person.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, that's glorious.
Me and Diego only have one friend that is militaristic in his anger against Star Trek Into Darkness.
Yeah.
So that is hilarious.
Yeah,
and I wish he was listening right now, and I want him to know that I'm talking about him, and I don't agree with any of his views. He wrote a manifesto.
Oh, really?
He wrote a manifesto denouncing Star Trek Into Darkness, and it was like 3 pages going on and on about every little detail of the movie that he didn't agree with. And Star Trek Into Darkness is one of my favorite Star Trek movies, so I didn't pay attention to his manifesto. But what were we talking about before I got off on this angry subject?
Just the new reboots.
Oh, the new reboots.
But I would like to say we still love you, Diego Chavez. You were a great guest here.
Absolutely.
Your presence was greatly appreciated.
One of my oldest friends.
Yeah, well then you should look up his show.
Oh, the gaming.
Yeah,
right? He does a lot with Snow College Gaming.
Yeah, he's the president of the Snow College Gaming. So I brought him on a couple weeks ago to talk about gaming. We talked about League of Legends. We talked about video games, how gaming has evolved, how we're like in the 8th generation of gaming systems right now. Right?
Insane.
But yeah.
That would have been a good show. Yeah, he's a good guy. So the reboots of Star Trek. So for those of you not familiar, the basic storyline of the new Star Trek is that it's all about time travel. Like 60 years after Star Trek takes place, this being the last Star Trek movie with Captain Kirk. 60 years after that, Spock and a group of Romulans travel back in time to 30 years before. They travel back to the year that Captain Kirk was born.
Oh, okay.
And so that's probably about 20 years before Star Trek even started.
Yeah.
And because they travel back in time, they alter the timeline.
Huh.
And so now J.J. Abrams and the writers for the new Star Trek movies have free space. They can space, that was Star Trek humor. They can
but it's
they can write new stories, and they can invent new characters and new situations without trampling all over the original storylines, because those original storylines are sacred
Right.
to geeks who've grown up their whole lives watching
of course.
it. Yeah.
It's like changing what Han Solo. That's like if you made Han Solo not shoot first.
Han Solo absolutely shot
He
first.
shot first.
He shot first. So, man, now I want to talk about Greedo. Greedo was the first word coming out of my mouth just a minute ago. No, so, like, one example. In the new Star Trek movie, in the 2009 one, the planet Vulcan gets destroyed while Kirk and Spock are in the Academy. But in the original series, they go to Vulcan all the time.
Yeah.
Star Trek 3, they go and visit Vulcan, and a lot of the story takes place on the planet Vulcan.
Right.
And so a lot of people, like my angry friend, look at Star Trek, this new one, and say, "Oh, they're messing up the story. They're messing up all this stuff." But they created a new timeline by involving this time travel thing. And I think it was really clever, and I think it was smart, so they can make new stories without trampling all over the old ones. And my
Right.
dad, who, like I mentioned, is a purist, a pure Star Trek fan, and he loves the new movies, and he loves this direction they've taken. Now, here's the thing about Benedict Cumberbatch and about Khan.
Ladies, don't swoon.
Yeah,
it's fine.
try not to. I'm glad I don't have Benedict Cumberbatch's voice, because if I did, I wouldn't use my powers for good. I would sweep as many ladies off their feet as I possibly could. His voice makes me swoon. So,
Yeah.
anyways, Benedict Cumberbatch. So we can talk about Khan a little bit. So, like I said in the episode of Space Seed, when Khan wakes up, he's like an Indian prince.
Yeah.
He has very dark skin, and he has a really thick accent, and he's an interesting character. And they're not totally clear on what race he is,
Right.
But he's definitely kind of Latino.
Yeah.
And then when he comes back in The Wrath of Khan, he's I hate to say whiter, but he's not. His skin isn't dark brown. He's not covered in makeup like he was,
Right.
but he still has a thick Latino accent,
Yeah.
and kind of that personality and that his characteristics. And so originally they had cast, I can't remember the guy's name. He's a very popular Hispanic actor right now, and he's really dark and scary, and he would have been perfect. He would have
Really?
been perfect to play Khan. But he had other commitments.
Oh, is this the guy that played Machete?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. I wish I could remember his name. It'll probably come to me at like 2 o'clock in the morning. But,
Yeah, right. You're gonna wake up in a cold sweat. I remember it.
But so J.J. Abrams was really upset about this guy not being able to do it, not being able to do the show. And so this is a fun fact. One of his assistants, one of the people that were working closely with Abrams, said, are you familiar with the TV show Sherlock? And he said, no, not really. And he's like, well, check this out. They watched the first couple episodes of Sherlock, and J.J. Abrams was so impressed with Benedict Cumberbatch that they contacted him, and they used this tall, pale British guy to replace this Hispanic villain, to play this Hispanic villain. And honestly, I think Benedict Cumberbatch was so fantastic as Khan. It was a different character. It was kind of a reinvention of the character, but the story held true that he was a genetically enhanced super soldier. He was super intelligent, and he was there to...
Steve Rogers status.
Exactly. He was there to help the Federation build an army. And I thought he was a great villain. The timeline thing, because Vulcan was destroyed in the first movie, rather than finding Khan 30 years from now on the Botany Bay, and it's Captain Kirk who stumbles into his ship, the Federation, another ship, stumbled upon it because they were out searching the galaxy. And it's all part of the timeline shift.
Right.
And so I really thought they did a fantastic job. They pay homage to the original series while, carving new ground.
Yeah. Because you don't want it to be an exact replica, otherwise what's the point?
Exactly. Yep, I think a lot of Star Trek fans out there, like my angry friend, would only be happy.
Like my angry friend.
Oh, when we fight about Star Trek, we fight about Star Trek. And it's like a lot of people will only be happy if they make a shot-for-shot remake, or if they just completely leave it alone forever. And I want new fans. I want to be able to enjoy Star Trek with new people. Yeah. And I love seeing these new actors and new characters. I think Chris Pine playing Captain Kirk is amazing.
I really like Carl Urban.
Carl Urban as Bones. I think Carl Urban playing the Doctor is the best casting choice they made.
For a second there, when you said playing the Doctor, I went a little Doctor Who. I was like, wait, what?
I'm sorry,
no,
Dr. McCoy.
Yeah.
What is McCoy's first name? I'm embarrassed right now. Leonard McCoy.
Yes.
Goodness sakes.
I'm supposed to know this, man.
Because Carl Urban captured his character so well. Oh, man. He was just a joy to watch on the screen. So, in a very long, roundabout way of answering your question, I am a huge fan of the new Star Trek movies.
Okay. In a similar growth-changing direction. Some people like it, some people don't. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, kind of jumping tracks. We're going to go into Star Wars. So you say Star Trek is better than Star Wars.
Okay. When have I said that? Okay. I know I haven't said it in this interview.
I guess you actually have not said it. Just being a Trekkie.
That's true. And a lot of people imagine this. There's an imaginary line between Trekkies. And do you Star Wars fans even have a name? No. Other than Star Wars fans?
Yeah, we're just...
All right, well, deal with that.
We're one of the fandoms that don't have a name. I'm in lots of fandoms, and they all have names, but yeah.
We'll work on that. We'll figure out a good
By the time the movie comes out, I'm sure we'll get together. Tumblr will invent a name for them.
Probably. Actually, the thing is, Star Wars is so universally liked that the name for a Star Wars fan is just human. That's what it is. Are you human? Well, you're born with a liking of Star Wars.
Yeah, my mom scoffs at the word nerd, but she still appreciates the original Star Wars trilogy.
Absolutely. Well, okay, here's the thing. If we're going to talk about Star Wars, comparing Star Wars and Star Trek is comparing, science fiction apples and oranges. My biggest argument, because if I do get into the argument of Star Trek versus Star Wars, I will always take the side of Star Trek. Because Star Trek takes place in the 24th century. Mm-hmm. So hundreds of years after World War III is when the storyline of Star Trek picks up. Mm-hmm. And Star Wars, as you know, happened a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So whenever I see a Star Wars fan that's fighting me and saying yada, 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 blah, 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 whatever, Star Wars is better, I tell them, you're living in the past. You're living in the past. Star Wars was a long time ago. Star Trek is the future. Star Wars, it's called Star Wars. They're warring. They're fighting and killing each other. Star Trek is a quest for peace and knowledge. Gosh, what was I going to say?
You're on such a good rant, too.
I know, I am on a huge rant. The Prime Directive is better and stronger and smarter than the will of the Force. Follow the Prime Directive, not the will of the Force. Now, this is my rant, but I really love both of these fandoms. But if I have to fight for one, I'm going to fight for Star Trek every time.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, see, I was in Star Wars. I got into Star Wars in 7th grade. So, loyalty and history, I'm going to have to go with Star Wars.
I think I got into Star Wars in like the 7th week in my mother's womb. So, but I got into Star Trek like the 6th week. So, I have to take loyalty to Star Trek. Okay, riddle me this. Does Star Trek have a Jar Jar Binks?
Oh, he went there. Oh, that hurts.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
it hurts inside.
There's no Jar Jar Binks.
Why did you do that to me?
In Star Trek. Actually, I can't give too much crap to Jar Jar Binks. I got an email last week from Ahmed Best.
You have a very specific grin on your face. You're like, you ready for this?
I'm very proud of this fact. I got an email from Ahmed Best last week on Reddit, who played the voice of Jar Jar Binks.
Really?
Yep, he was doing an internet forum, and I said something, and he responded to me, and so I was very happy. And so my Jar Jar Binks points, it went up. My Jar Jar Binks scale. So
Jar Jar Binks?
He's obnoxious and terrible, but Ahmed Best did his best. So
what did you and Ahmed Best talk about?
people were just asking him, like, how does it feel being involved in such a huge project? And then some people were kind of rude and like, how does it feel to be the most hated Star Wars character of all time? I don't know. You said you were introduced to Star Wars in 7th grade.
Yeah.
And so that would have been probably around the time Episode 3 was relatively new.
Yeah, because what it was I told my neighbor that I had never seen any of the Star Wars movies, and he thought that was despicable, and so he gave me all 6, and I watched them in a weekend.
Oh, that sounds like a glorious weekend.
Oh yeah.
See, I was raised watching Episode 4, 5, and 6, the original series that was released in the 70s and the 80s, and those are the 3 classics, and those are 3 of the best science fiction movies ever made. And then when I was 9 is when Star Wars Episode 1 came out. Mm-hmm. And then a few years later, Episode 2, and then Episode 3. And so my childhood and teenage years were dominated by waiting for the next Star Wars movie. And so I enjoyed them immensely as they were released because I was a kid and maybe I didn't know any better. I loved Episode 1 when it came out, and I was obsessed with Jar Jar Binks.
Yeah,
and to
as
this
a child.
day,
Yeah, as a child, you look back.
I think Liam Neeson played the coolest Jedi portrayed in all of Star Wars. I think Qui-Gon Jinn is amazing, and Darth Maul is probably the best bad guy. But as far as the characters, the characters created and written in Episode 1, 2, and 3 they're not on the same level as Luke Skywalker and Han Solo.
Yeah,
and
they're pretty
Princess
two-dimensional.
Leia. Exactly. Whereas that's where I feel, again, Star Trek is superior. I feel that Captain Kirk, if Captain Kirk and Han Solo got in a fist fight, I absolutely think Captain Kirk would win.
I want to see Deadliest Warrior.
Absolutely.
I want to see them do that.
Captain Kirk versus Han Solo.
Oh, that would be glorious.
Now, if we were in a shootout, that'd be a lot more fun to watch, and I think that'd be more evenly matched because Han Solo is unstoppable on his blaster.
Right.
But no science fiction character in the history of science fiction has been in as many fist fights as James T. Kirk. So I think there'd be a glorious defeat there if Kirk fought Han Solo. I feel like Star Trek has established characters. I don't know, they've withstood the test of time. I mean, so has the original series. If we're pitting all of Star Trek against the original 3 movies, I don't know. That's difficult. That's a lot tougher.
Yeah, I think I would put more the Shatner age of Star Trek versus the Luke Skywalker age, and then Patrick Stewart versus Anakin. And
yep, absolutely. I feel, and if you look at it at a cultural standpoint, Star Trek doesn't stand a chance. Star Trek had nowhere near the influence that I mean, when Star Wars came out, it destroyed the planet. Everybody knew Star Wars.
Yeah, you can go anywhere in the world and go, and everyone knows.
Darth Vader.
Everyone knows.
May the Force be with you. Do you understand? Think about.
I don't know. May the Force be with you versus live long and prosper. I think those are.
That's true.
Those are both probably pretty equally matched.
That's true, but Live Long and Prosper has 50 episodes and a dozen movies, whereas I think Obi-Wan Kenobi says "May the Force be with you" twice, and it's stuck.
Yeah.
I mean, they just think about the influence that you have to create a household term that everybody understands.
That's
May
true.
the Force be with you. Live long and prosper.
Yeah.
What else? There's tons. There's
Yeah,
lots
yeah.
of nerdy sayings.
Yeah. Yeah. And so J.J. Abrams is directing the new Star Trek, right?
Uh-huh.
And then he's also directing the new Star Wars.
Yes. And I'm really happy about that because
Really?
I feel like this is a unification of the two fandoms. Like I said, there is this imaginary line where people think like if you like Star Trek, you must hate Star Wars.
Yeah.
And I love them both. I love Star Trek and I love Star Wars. And I feel like J.J. Abrams directing them both is it's a sign of that. It's a sign that like there's unification here.
It's putting a Klingon on the
Enterprise. Amen. And so
I tied it around.
Heck
I made
yeah.
it work.
Way to be. That was an excellent reference. But J.J. Abrams is just a wildly talented director. And he signed on to do Star Trek. And actually, fun fact here: when Disney purchased Star Wars and Lucasfilm from George Lucas,
Yeah.
J.J. Abrams was one of their first picks to direct Star Wars, and right off the bat, he said no.
Really?
He is a huge Star Wars fan, and he was raised loving it. And I feel like the reason he said no, he's committed to Star Trek, and that's taking up a lot of his time and resources.
Right.
And he didn't want to have that responsibility of carrying the Star Trek legacy. Like, I mean, if these next 3 movies aren't wonderful, everybody's going to blame him.
Yeah, because then it's gonna be 2/3 of the franchise is gonna be laughed at.
Exactly. And so everybody's looking at him to rescue the franchise from episode 1, 2, and 3. And so I understand him not wanting that responsibility. And this is kind of cool that Disney was like, all right, J.J. Abrams is out. Let's ask all these other people. Mm-hmm. And Joss Whedon, is spearheading Marvel and
Yeah.
Christopher Nolan and is all tied up in Batman and Superman and everything.
Right.
And they went to Steven Spielberg. And Disney asked Steven Spielberg to direct the new Star Wars movies.
He hasn't done anything in a while.
Yeah, the last movie he did was Lincoln, that he actually had it in the director's seat. But he usually sticks to producing now.
Oh, okay.
And so they asked him to direct Star Wars. And like you said, he's been out of the game for a little bit, and especially out of the science fiction in the director's seat.
Yeah.
But
Super 8, which came out 2009.
Yep, he
2010.
produced, and that's funny you mentioned that because Steve Spielberg produced Super 8 and J.J. Abrams directed it.
Oh wait, really?
Uh-huh.
I
And
didn't know.
so they have a close personal relationship. So Disney approaches Steven Spielberg and says, "Will you direct the new Star Wars franchise?" And he says, "No, but go try Abrams again." And Steven Spielberg called him and said, "You should direct this."
Uh-huh.
And Disney came back and asked him. He said, "All right, I'll do it." And I think that's a testament to the strength of their professional relationship. That J.J. Abrams really is our generation's Steven Spielberg.
Yeah.
I mean, Steven Spielberg is responsible for Close Encounters of the Third Kind and
E.T.
Jaws and E.T. and
The B movie.
the B movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, like Saving Private Ryan and Schindler's List. I
Oh,
mean,
my gosh.
he's an icon in and of himself. And J.J. Abrams, I feel, has that same storytelling ability that Steven Spielberg does. And so I think he'll carry on that tradition that George Lucas established with the original Star Wars, because that's what J.J. Abrams does the best. Mm-hmm. He, like he did in Super 8, he creates these characters that you can connect with and that you love. And that's what George Lucas did in the original series. And that's where I feel that he failed in episode 1, 2, and 3. There was not one character in this new trilogy that was as lovable and as admirable as Luke Skywalker or as Han Solo or as Lando Calrissian or any of the originals.
Right.
And so I feel like that is J.J. Abrams' greatest strength, is creating characters that you can get behind. And that's what he did with the new new Star Trek movies. And that's why I agree so much with Benedict Cumberbatch. He created a really great villain that you could cheer for on the one hand, and then
Right.
you could just despise and hate on the other hand.
Yeah.
He did the same thing with Captain Kirk, and we talked about Carl Urban. And so I have high hopes for the new Star Wars movies. I absolutely do.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that Benedict Cumberbatch makes a good villain is because lately, it seems all the British guys are being like there was a commercial for it, how British people are always playing the best villains, because there's Tom Hiddleston as Loki, and
Tom
everyone loves
Hiddleston.
him. Benedict Cumberbatch is Khan. There's all these villains that are always British. Mm-hmm. And they always seem to make the best villains. Sir Ian McKellen.
Okay, well, let's just be honest here. They cast all these hot British guys as villains to get fangirls in the seats.
Yeah, that's true too.
Like, I think half the theaters would have been empty if Tom Hiddleston hadn't been playing Loki. There'd have been a whole lot less 14-year-old screaming girls.
Well, I mean, Tom Hiddleston was a lot less known before he was in Thor.
That's very true. Very true.
He was huge in in London theater.
Right.
But as far as American cinema goes, he's not that big.
That put him on the map a lot more.
Yeah,
and
it
if
really
you look on like IMDb, I mean, he has a lot of upcoming movies. Like his career is taking off.
Yeah.
Like really exploding. And that's good. He's really talented.
Yeah.
He's fun to watch.
Yeah, like
and
he was
I'll
in
give it to
War
the
Horse and a couple like period dramas, but
absolutely. And I mean, you've got to give it to him. He's a tall, handsome, chivalrous dude.
devilish.
Like, devilishly handsome. Let's be real. How are normal guys supposed to get girlfriends?
Yeah,
when...
like we're kind of like stuck in the dust.
Yeah, we're stuck in the dust of Benedict Cumberbatch and Tom Hiddleston.
We did it. Somehow both of us have girlfriends. High five.
High five to us.
Yeah.
Yes.
We did it.
We have
Wow.
girlfriends. Even though we sit here and talk about Star Trek for 2 hours.
While people listen to us. By the way, is there anyone listening to us? If you guys are listening and you want us to talk about something or you want to just say hi, text KAGE with whatever you want your message to be to 66746, or you can tweet it, #FandomLife, and we'll do a nice little shout out. So is anyone listening? If you're listening, say hi. If you want us to talk about anything from Star Trek or even sci-fi or Comic-Con, because even that, because we both
Oh,
been to
yeah. If anybody was at Comic-Con today, man, shoot us a text.
Yeah, so KAGE with whatever you want to 66746 or tweet it #FandomLife. But yeah, so earlier you were saying that Star Trek, there's a lot of Star Trek references in Family Guy.
Uh-huh.
And I'm a huge, like I said, I was in Star Wars forever, and I've been in Star Trek for the past like 2-3 weeks.
Right.
So I've always seen the Star Wars references.
Okay.
Can you think of any Star Trek references?
My
off the top of your head?
absolute. There's a couple of episodes where there's there's the episode where Captain Picard and like the whole cast is there with Family Guy, and Will Wheaton voiced one of the actors, and they all
Really?
stop and get burgers. I mean, it was hilarious. But my absolute favorite Star Trek reference from Family Guy. Now, you might think of this as a spoiler, but if you haven't seen Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, you've had 30 years to get out and watch it.
Yeah, like
so you
with
deserve
my
to have
show,
this
I
spoiled.
say spoilers are open game.
Yep, spoilers happen. So Spock dies at the end of Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. And there's a very touching funeral scene where Captain Kirk speaks at his funeral. And he says, "Of my friend, I can only say this. Of all the souls that I have encountered in my travels, his was the most human." And then they put Spock's body in a torpedo tube, and they fire him out into space. And it's similar to giving like a burial at sea.
Right.
And in Family Guy, there's an episode where Stewie's bear, Rupert, it's Rupert.
Yeah.
Rupert.
Rupert.
Does he die? Does he get lost? He gets like run over by a car or torn up or something.
Yeah, I think it's like that.
And Stewie's really sad, and he turns and he walks away. And then it shows Stewie on board the Enterprise wearing a dress uniform, and you see the bear rolling down a conveyor belt towards the torpedo launcher. And
I think I remember this. Yeah.
Scotty's in the back playing bagpipes, and Stewie says, "Of my bear, I can only say this: of all the souls that I've encountered, his was the most human." And it's hilarious.
You got that voice pretty down.
I do some okay impersonations.
I like that.
Oh man, so that's my favorite. That might be my favorite Family Guy moment of all time. I laughed so hard. They play the same music. Stewie has the same inflection in his voice, and his voice breaks when he says human. Oh, it was hilarious. And that was a testament to Seth MacFarlane's fandom of Star Trek.
Yeah. We did get a message. The last 4 digits of the number was 7582, and they just said, "What up, smiley face?"
What up? We're smiling, facing back at you.
Yeah, you can totally see our faces smiling.
We are smiling.
Ding.
Wait, is it a winky face?
No, it's just a smiley face.
Just a smile.
But it has the question mark exclamation point.
Oh. So
yeah.
it's like, it's not
like-
just what up. It's like,
what up? Yeah,
Oh,
you're
that was
exactly.
perfect.
That was nice.
That was nice.
We had a nice little synchronization there.
Was it 7852?
77582.
7582.
And-
7582. We are your friends.
We like you, man.
We appreciate you listening to us talk about Star Trek, and we hope you are having a good afternoon in your mom's basement. Evening. It's nighttime, isn't it?
It is 9:30.
Oh, it's past your bedtime. 9582. 7582.
758. Why is that the bedtime? They're probably college students.
You never know.
Well, it's either college students who thank you for listening, or it's a kid who's up past his bedtime. Thank you for listening, or it is one of the nice grown-ups that actually live in this town, because they're actually grown-ups who do live here that
There's
don't
grown-ups here?
Yeah, that don't actually go work for the college.
Oh,
There's an actual city here.
Turkey farmers.
Yes, that's what they all are.
There's a lot of those.
Either that or they work at Anderson's Drug and Floral.
Or Maverick.
Or Maverick.
Love Maverick.
No, because it's the ladies who ring up our food in the den.
Oh my
They
gosh.
work at Maverick.
Yep. Gosh, I love Maverick. I'm so glad we have a 24-hour place here in Ephraim. I'm so grateful.
Yeah,
for
it hits 12:01. I'm hungry. Well, you can go to Maverick or you can go to Denny's.
And Denny's is what, 45 minutes away?
The one we go to, yeah.
Yep.
There's another one that's like 20 minutes away, but it's not as good, so I go to the one that's 45 minutes away.
Oh, Jaffiel. All right, well, thank you, 7582, for texting us, and I hope other people text us too.
Oh, someone said, "Who's your co-host tonight, Sean?"
My name is John O'Driscoll. I am the co-host tonight on Fandom Life. I've been greatly anticipating coming and doing this because I talk about Star Trek all the time anyways. I drive back and forth from Sandy back to Ephraim to go visit my parents. And I can't tell you how many trips I've had to Sandy that have been completely filled with just me gabbing on about Star Trek. And so I'm very grateful to be on the show tonight and just to get this out of my system, honestly.
Also, he was a member of the LTI team. If you guys got to see any of those, he was in a couple of those.
Absolutely go see it more next year.
Yeah, and he's just he's in the theater circuit. His girlfriend has played numerous characters for our wonderful performances
Ooh, yes,
here.
she's in Blythe Spirit tonight, actually.
Yeah, tonight's closing night.
So if you didn't get to see it, you missed out. That was a really wonderful show.
Oh my gosh, it was so funny. It was a great show. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then and yeah, so we met through your girlfriend because we did You Can't Take It With You earlier in this year.
Oh right, you guys were friends before that, huh?
Yeah, so we met early at the very beginning of the year.
Right.
And she's awesome. I just gotta say, I really like your girlfriend.
She's a doll.
I mean, I like my girlfriend more. I
like my girlfriend more than I like your girlfriend.
Well, you know, so wait, what? So why aren't you talking radio, John? You're way good.
Why aren't I talking?
Wait, why aren't you taking?
Why
Why aren't you taking radio, John?
I'd like to take radio next year. Actually, I'm really enjoying this, and I think I'd probably see. Here's my problem. If I took this radio class and I got the joy of being like Sean and having my own awesome radio show, talk show, it would be all the Killers and all Star Trek. That's pretty much my whole life. I'd probably talk about.
Well, you can do that.
Perfect.
They would let you do that, honestly.
But everybody would get sick of listening to the Killers. I understand that nobody enjoys them as much as I do.
It's 2 hours out of a week.
That 2 hours be so filled to the brim with the Killers and Star Trek that people would punch their radios to make it stop. So,
no, I mean, like, if you guys are thinking about wanting to do this, you just take the Radio 1 class, and if you take Radio 1, and then you have to have a regular DJ shift where it's just you will play the pre-approved playlist, which I do that Fridays from 6 to 8. And then that's you have to use the DJ name, so you can't use your own name. So I'm the nerd on there. So you're on there with the nerd. Here's blah blah. I tell about current events around the school, whatever. But then if you do that, then you can also have a specialty show where it can be whatever music you want. It can be a talk show. You can bring guests on. You can pretty much do almost anything you want with obviously with reasonable limitations.
Right, we're not going to do like Howard Stern or something. No
Right.
offense to Howard Stern if you're out there listening to us.
On Sirius XM channel 100 and channel 101. I'm very specific with that because I work over at the Key Research Solutions down the road. If you guys aren't familiar with that, a lot of people just call it the call center, and we do
Are we having conversations with 7842?
We are 7582.
Oh, 7582.
7582.
7582. Who
you
are
should
you?
do it.
Can we be friends, 7582?
Follow us on Twitter, 7582.
Yes. Actually, you know what? I don't even want to know your real name. I like calling you 7582. To bring this back into Star Trek and Star Wars, I feel like if you were 7582, you would be a Borg in Star Trek because they're named numbers, or you would be like TK421 in Star Wars. Remember TK421? Why aren't you at your post? TK421,
Okay,
do you
yeah.
copy?
Yeah.
So you will be 7582. I'm imagining you like a female droid from Spaceballs.
So it's a female now.
I assume.
We're just putting female.
Are you a female 7582?
I think we're getting a little too personal. Don't.
Sorry. Sorry, 7582.
But 758. If you want to, you can still follow us. I'm at SEAN_TASKER at Sean_Tasker, and then your Twitter username, Jono.
John K. O'Driscoll. I don't really have a lot of Twitter followers, and then
You have 6.
I have 6 Twitter followers. Thank you, Sean.
Yes.
My self-esteem is not based on the number of Twitter followers that I have.
Self-esteem is 6. I have
Self-esteem is 6
I have 6 self-esteem.
out of 100. So
I have 6 self-esteem.
oh man, no, JK. Let's talk.
Did you just say JK?
Yeah,
Child.
I used to sign JK when I said it. It's JK.
Yeah. That's
JK.
that's one thing.
No,
but-
that made me feel more like a tool. But let's discuss Star Trek some more.
Yeah, let's
Or
get.
Star Wars.
We got a little off topic, didn't we?
Absolutely. Freaking 7582.
Yeah. So if Jono's voice starts to fade, he's starting to get a little itchy. Starting to
Oh,
walk
sorry,
around
I
the studio.
wander.
No, it's fine. We've been in here for an hour and 37 minutes now.
I seriously cannot believe we've been doing this for an hour and a half.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's insane.
Wait, I think it's 7582 said yes, I am a girl, but we're gonna stay off the specifics now.
I just assumed
off
because
the personals.
no, there's no reason for assuming. We're just gonna call you 7582, Miss 7582.
How you doing, Miss 7582?
Star Trek.
Right.
Star Trek.
If anyone else besides 7582 wants to talk about something, or if you do, if anyone wants us,
This is a great question. What was you for over a week? You nuked all the Star Trek movies
Yes,
on
I did.
Netflix.
Yes.
What was your favorite Star Trek movie?
mine would probably have to be, I think it was 4 when they go back to the 80s.
Okay.
Just because I'm really big on comedy,
Yeah.
and that was hilarious. That entire episode, I was cracking up because Captain Kirk used some more colorful vocabulary, because no one takes you serious if you don't use more colorful vocabulary. And so Spock tries to swear.
Oh man.
And Spock cannot swear.
That's-
And it is the funniest thing ever.
That is one of my favorite humorous scenes in Star Trek. So for those of you unfamiliar with Star Trek 4 is called The Voyage Home. And in it, these aliens come to Earth in the 24th century, and they're speaking whale.
Or speaking humpback whale, trying to get in contact with their
So
brethren.
imagine Dory in Finding Nemo speaking whale.
To find his
I
son.
think he said he wanted a root beer float.
Or we should go down his throat.
But so the whales come to Earth, the whale aliens, and apparently they had planted humpback whales on the Earth thousands of years before humans were there. And so humpback whales were aliens. But in the 24th century, whales are extinct on Earth.
Because we illegally, what's the word I'm looking for? Poach. Is it poacher?
Poached, yeah. We poached them.
Yeah.
People would poach them. And so in the 80s, when this movie was released, Save the Whales was a big political thing.
Save the whales, man.
And so in the 24th century, whales are extinct. So Captain Kirk and his intrepid crew have to travel back in time to the 80s.
By slingshotting around the gravity of the sun, which I thought that was pretty awesome.
Oh,
How They
yeah.
were like, in order to go fast and so fast if you go fast enough past the speed of light, then that's how you go back in time.
Right, exactly.
So they use the gravity of the sun to slingshot themselves around, so they get so much speed that they go back to the 20th century. Mm-hmm. Then they have to kidnap these humpback whales from like a SeaWorld-esque place. I'm not sure exactly like what it was. It was some some aquatic research facility or something.
Right, and they work with a female scientist on Earth, and she helps them save the whales. And it's a fun movie, and it's hilarious because we've advanced so far as a species in the future that people don't swear very often. Yeah. And so these guys from the 24th century go back in time, and they have to swear so they can communicate, and they're terrible at swearing. And
then
so
Captain Kirk
funny.
goes on a date with said female scientist, and then like at the end of the date, he gets ready to walk out, and she's like, "What? Do you not use currency in the 24th century?" He's like, "Well, we don't." So she has to pay for the dinner.
Captain Kirk tries to get away without paying for it.
And yeah, she gets all mad because she has to pay for the date.
Because, in the 24th century, they don't have money and they don't care about. That's one of my favorite scenes, actually, in Star Trek First Contact. They travel back in time, and they bring this woman up to the Enterprise because they've got medicine or whatever that she needs.
Right.
And she gets up there and she sees the ship and she says, "How the heck much did this thing cost?" And Captain Picard says, "We don't have currency in the future. We don't work for financial gain. We work to better ourselves."
Yeah.
And that's something I love about Star Trek.
Yeah, it was crazy. That line. That movie was really good.
First Contact.
Oh wait, no, sorry. Wait.
Or the other one, Voyage Home.
But First Contact was, that was a good one too, because when they went back talking to the guy who created the warp speed drive. What's his name?
Zephram Cochrane.
Yes. And
Boy, I have never felt nerdier in my entire life
than I have.
Yes, but just really in this last hour and a half. It's like, what's the name of the guy that invented warp drive in this fictional universe that you're obsessed with? His name is Zephram Cochrane. He lived in the year 2063. He actually first successfully tested his warp ship on April 4th.
I love how you're using this voice.
This is my nerd voice, Sean.
Well, according to my calculations.
It was about 50 years after the Third World War that they launched the first successful warp ship launched by Zephram Cochrane.
And he gets a statue that's 20 meters tall.
Oh my gosh.
And it's of him pointing up at the stars.
Reaching out towards the future.
Yeah, oh man, that was... And he gets so stressed out by how much they're talking. "You're so great." He's like, "No, I'm not. You're so great." He gets so stressed that he tries to bolt his way out of there. And they chase him down and throw him in the river. And "No, you have to do this." He's like, "But I can't." "You have to do this."
"I don't want to be a statue." And they shoot him with their ray guns.
"I don't want to be a statue." That was glorious.
Oh man, I love it. And Star Trek really offers us some timeless wisdom.
Yeah, and
there's a quote there in Star Trek First Contact that they made up for the movie. The writers of Star Trek wrote this. It said, "Don't try to be a great man, just be a man and let history make its own judgments."
And who said that? You did. 10 years from now. And I was like, oh.
I blame my obsession with music a lot on that movie. Anytime I'm about to start a road trip, and you probably appreciate this, when you're about to go on a road trip, you have a song. You have a song
Right.
that gets you pumped up. Barney Stinson had "You Give Love a Bad Name,"
Yes.
and Zephram Cochrane's startup music is "Magic Carpet Ride" by Steppenwolf.
Yes.
And because of that movie, I have always loved that song. So thank you, Star Trek.
Yeah, mine
Thank
would
you for good
probably
music.
be AC/DC's "Back in Black."
Good choice.
Which I did listen to that the first 4 or 5 times I went home. But now
Absolutely.
after, this 2.5 hour drive
Okay,
is very...
if you like Back in Black, one of my go-to road trip songs is "Big Gun" by AC/DC.
Yeah?
I don't know if it was released on any of their actual albums. Boy, I feel like a hipster saying that. I don't know if it was actually released on any of their albums. But
this voice that you use, I gotta say.
yeah, that's my mocking nerdy voice. No, it was
Mocking
on the
yourself.
album for Last Action Hero, which is a cheesy old Arnold Schwarzenegger movie.
Okay.
And if you get a chance, watch that. That's on Netflix too, and that's a really fun show. But Big Gun is my favorite AC/DC song, and it's not one that's very well known. If you haven't heard of it before, you're not as hip as me.
It's pretty underground. You probably never heard of it.
Punch me in the face.
I remember we were making a road trip to Salt Lake City a couple months ago, and we were just making fun of each other for being hip.
Sherlock!
Oh, we were chasing after the train. And that was the only thing I could think of screaming was just Sherlock in like the perfect John voice, because I can only do it if I'm screaming, so I can't do it on the air right now. But if I'm shouting, I can do the perfect John Watson screaming Sherlock voice.
I have never felt more British in my life than running down the streets. And it was cold. It was cold and foggy.
So we were wearing.
It felt like we were in
And you were wearing
London.
your pea coat that was like flapping in the wind behind you.
I had my sweet pea coat on. We run and jump on the train, and he's yelling Sherlock. I felt British. I felt like we were taking the freaking Hogwarts Express.
It was great.
It was
great.
great. That was a fun trip.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Comic-Con. I want to hear, because my heart is broken into a million pieces right now. What is the line from A Knight's Tale? The pieces of my broken heart are so small they could be passed through the eye of a needle, because I did not get to go to the fan experience. The fan experience technically is separate and different from Comic-Con, but it's
like Comic-Con's little brother.
Exactly.
But it's still gigantic, and it was my first con.
Oh.
And I'm so grateful that, like, I was alone. I went by myself because I was planning on meeting up with some people.
Gotcha.
You were.
Yeah, I
thought you were
supposed
going
to
show up.
I was
waiting for you. And
broken
then,
heart pieces.
And then, about 1 p.m. you text me. You're like, "Oh, you mean Comic? Yeah, I'm not coming to Comic-Con today.
Nope. Didn't have enough money."
And then my other friend from high school, he was gonna meet up with me too, but he thought that I had other friends that were with me, and so he was like, I'll show up, about 1:30, So I was there. I woke up at 7:15 this morning to get there, and I showed up there, and I stood in line for like an hour waiting, like talking to other nerds. I made friends with the people in front of me, behind me. We were looking at other cosplays around me,
That is the funnest part about being at Comic-Con, is just being surrounded by all the nerds. I mean, the who's who of nerds come out for Comic-Con. People that haven't been outside of their mother's basement for the last 6 months since the last Comic-Con.
Yeah.
And heaven knows how long it had been since before the first Comic-Con that we had here.
Yeah.
And it's fun to just be united in our nerdiness and just congratulate each other on cosplay and buy cool things and show them off. So much fun.
Yeah, but like all of my or not all, but the majority of my friends are people who like sit around watching Netflix, and the only time they get out is when I take them out. So I create like my own little nerd circle. I bring people out of their houses to hang out.
Get on you.
Because I'm like, we nerds need to stick together and actually have a social life. So I am everyone's social life pretty much.
So I want to hear, tell me about, what was different? I guess you haven't been to the other Comic-Con.
No, this is my only one.
What was the fan experience like?
From what I could tell, it was a bit smaller.
Okay.
But there was, had all the same things. There were celebrities that you could, get autographs from. There were the vendors. There were the artists. There were the panels. I went to a Game of Thrones panel.
Nice.
And we talked about the Red Wedding and the Purple Wedding, for those of you who are Game of Thrones fans. We talked all about that. And then after that, I went to, what was the one after that? It was a positive psychology of fandoms and geek culture, which I thought that was why it's good to be a nerd, but it ended up being, how going through depression and anxiety can be helped through comics and superheroes.
I
and
absolutely
Luke Skywalker
agree with that. I am a huge advocate for movie therapy, man. If you're feeling down, I can recommend a million different movies to watch and think about this character and what did Luke Skywalker do that you can emulate in your own life.
It's Kermit the Frog. That's what you're doing.
Oh man, I do a kick awesome Kermit the Frog.
That
is actually pretty similar to my Kermit the Frog.
Oh, that's glorious.
Why are there so many songs about rainbows? Anyways.
Yeah. So then I went to that, and then I was in the physiology of zombies when my friend from high school showed up.
Sean, I need to tell you that I take deep personal insult that you did not attend the Next Generation panel that they had.
Well, what time was it?
I don't even know because I didn't get to go. But Marina Sirtis played Counselor Troy on Next Generation, and I have a deep connection with her because she was my first crush.
Really?
Literally the first girl I ever looked at and thought, she is pretty, I would like to hold her hand. Like,
I wanna hold.
I wanna hold Counselor Troy's hand. I had a crush on her when I was 3 years old. So
Wow.
she was there, and you had a chance to meet my lifetime crush, and you didn't take it. And Gates McFadden was there, who played the Doctor, and Jonathan Frakes, who played Captain Riker, and
I did see all their
Lieutenant
faces, though.
Worf, man. Michael Dorn was there. Patrick Stewart was there.
I did see all their faces and the lines that you had to pay the $70 to get their autographs.
Oh,
and I
buddy.
did walk down that section and be like, they look so old.
Oh, they're getting old.
old.
I want the world to know, and by world I mean everybody that's listening to us right now.
Or later on YouTube.
I did absolutely spend the money and meet. I met William Shatner, and that was me and my dad. The cornerstone of our friendship has always been Star Trek. We watched Star Trek together like 3 weeks ago, and we watched Star Trek together like 24 years ago. So. Me and my dad waited in line for an hour and a half and got to meet William Shatner. And this is a very touching, heartfelt, and personal story. I went to shake William Shatner's hand, and he was so bored and so tired of shaking nerds' hands that he kind of reached out to shake my hand and then gave up halfway through, and he gave me a finger shake. He grabbed onto my finger and he squoze it. And yes, so I got a finger squeeze from William Shatner, and just talking about it, I can feel the emotion just bubbling up. It was a beautiful moment.
You okay? You need to take a moment?
I'm all right. I'm all right.
We need to play a song.
My finger is still tingling, and I don't know if it's because he touched my finger or because I haven't washed it since he actually touched it.
Yeah, it might be tingling from the bacteria.
I think it might be the bacteria.
That is now having a small civilization upon...
They're building a town and they're worshiping me.
Good.
So that's a win.
Good. Of
That's
course,
a win.
they think that you're William Shatner.
I don't blame them. I've told them I'm William Shatner.
I can see you like late at night when you're about to go to bed, like staring at your finger. I am William Shatner.
I portrayed Captain James T. Kirk.
James
I played
Tiberius Kirk.
Captain, what was it, T.J. Hooker on the other TV show that he was on. That's the only other show that William Shatner was
I
really
am
on.
the Priceline negotiator.
I was on Boston Legal with Martha Stewart. Or the lady that looks like Martha Stewart. She played the Martha Stewart character in Miss Congeniality.
Oh my gosh.
That's all.
So FanX, sorry, but for FanX, they on Facebook they've been putting up every time that there's a new, guest that's coming on, they'll put up a little announcement for, right?
Uh-huh.
And so I followed them so I can know who's coming. And they said not Billy D. Williams, because he's actually a guy.
But Billy D. Williams was there.
Yeah, that's Lando Calrissian. No, what's his name? Some other guy and Martha Stewart. Like the guy that's like did like 80s exercise videos.
Oh.
Yeah.
It was Paula Deen.
Paula Deen.
And it was Richard Simmons.
Yes,
Richard
you know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
They said that they're coming, and I was just like, okay.
That was their April Fool's
That was
joke.
their April Fool's joke. It threw me off. Oh my gosh, I was like,
Man.
why are they?
Because I know if Richard Simmons had been there, boy, I would have been there too. I just love Richard Simmons.
And his awkward gingerness and.
Oh boy, that guy.
See,
is...
you can pull off. Well, you're like half ginger.
I am.
You got the brown on your head, but then you got the ginger beard.
I do have a red ginger beard. Yup. Which I'm proud of.
Your red beard.
It's rugged and Irish. And I'm rugged and Irish, so I'm happy.
Because I'm happy.
Well, geez, what do we got? We got 5 minutes.
Yeah, we got about 5 minutes. Five, 6
what
minutes.
would really make me happy, because I thoroughly enjoyed our discussion of Star Trek.
Good.
I would love to hear another killer song before we sign off.
Absolutely. But so before we do that, let's do some social media. So
Absolutely.
in case you guys you can follow him at John K. O'Driscoll, and O'Driscoll is Odriscoll. So at
Remember, I've only got 6 followers.
yes, I am his 6th. You can follow at John O'Driscoll and then at Sean_Tasker, or you can go on to YouTube, and then that's where I'm going to put all my Fandom Life episodes are on YouTube, which I will continue after this year's over, and I'll make it my own podcast, and I'll record it myself and put it on YouTube myself. So That's really exciting for me. I only have one more episode though on The Cage. That's next week. I am doing Doctor Who with a Miss Audrey Christensen. She is a huge Whovian.
Nice.
I saved Doctor Who for last because that is my favorite. So I will be having the most joy with that. I do apologize. This was a fantastic conversation. You were great. But yeah, so per request, I will play Somebody Told Me by The Killers. You guys are listening to 88.9 The Cage. Enjoy.